Because I went live on YouTube before and it was, yeah, it's just displaying like the laptop. Yep, so now it's, so I make that one the host first. Zoom room. Maybe, and it's just recreating it. So if I've made it the host, do I even need to leave? Should it show up on YouTube now with the right camera? Because if I leave on this laptop one, what's it showing you?
live broadcast as for us, so we need to use our microphones. All right, okay, as stated, there's no apologies, no declarations of interest or leave of absence. Public inputs or petitions, we have none, so.
I'll second it. Yeah, can I ask you, Mr. Chair, what did you find out about the wheeled vehicles from the motor camp going onto the beach for our disabled people?
I approached Matt Dice.
Yep.
Have a look at it, see if there was an option for them to do something in that area. So I'll get back to Matt. Yeah, I took down the diagrams and things that the board had just sent back to Matt Dice to see if it was an option for them to make it.
Thank you.
Does it go off? No. The museum roof, we had that paper for council, was withdrawn, but can you give us an update of what's happening with that? Is that Garrett or?
The museum roof, we're just looking at redesign of the roof to try and minimise the risk of leakages from internal gutters. So if we were to replace the roof as it is now, we'd carry some of the same risks that we've got at the moment around internal gutters and design of the roof. So if we think about Lawson Field Theatre, the redesign of the roof there was largely to minimise the risk of future leakages due to internal gutters. We think we can probably achieve the same sort of outcome with the museum roof. So that's just a bit of extra work we need to do.
Councillor Finn.
Thank you. Just in relation to that, do we have a time frame around that? Because if we're looking at exhibition pieces coming over from the UK for Te Ha, that roof would need to be replaced this summer at the latest, I would think.
We actually don't have budget at the moment to do the roof. So council will have to make a decision to make that budget available.
Right, so the time frame to get the work done that you're looking at right now to come back to council, what's that time frame? When are we looking at that?
We'd like to do it in the new financial year. It will need part of the long-term plan consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask, is there consideration for the architectural elements in that design, or is it simply an engineering task to remove the internal gutterings? Because I was, with the Lawson Field design, I felt that if we were going to the extent of creating a new roof shape, there can be much more beauty added to that than just a simple removal of the internal guttering.
I think there's probably going to be an expectation that we'll have to consider the architectural merit of that building and any replacement of the roof. So the answer would be yes.
Anything further from the minutes? Okay, that's been moved, Councillor Burdett, and seconded Councillor McLean. All those in favour? Against? Anything from the action sheet?
Yeah, thank you. Just on the action sheet in regards to the Peel Street toilets, page 26, I just wanted to know how we're getting on, or where are we at with the tender process?
So Mr. Blair's not here yet. He's going to be a little bit late. So we've completed the construction drawings and tender documents have been finalised. We haven't yet lodged resource consent and building consent. And we still expect to be completed this financial year.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I can give that Peel Street toilets a big tick. That's 10 years of scrapping to get it done. Well, it sounds good. It sounds good.
Nothing further from the action sheet? And we've also got the governance work plan there if anyone's got any issues with that. Okay, we'll move on to page 30, which is the community facilities plan consultation. Thank you, Jill. We did have that extraordinary meeting, which was the facilities plan, which we need to move as well. 10 to 25. Thank you. We have Councillor McLean. I'll second that. All those in favour?
All right.
Against, carried. All right, page 30, the community facilities plan consultation. The proposed changes in the toilets, we've got there that we've got 8 between Makauroi and Wainui. So I drove along there twice counting them. I can't find 8. There isn't 8.
Well, we're maintaining 8.
So I did add in the Wainui Surf Club as one of them. I've got Stockroot, Wainui Surf Club, Okatu, Chalet, Wales, Makauroi and Northern Makauroi, which is 7. Where's the other one? No, it says between Wainui and Makauroi. Yeah.
Is the Wainui Surf Club one open the whole time, or is it just when the surf club's operating?
The Wainui Surf is open all the time, but it's not obviously open all the time, and I've got an issue with that people don't actually see that as a public toilet. Possibly we're going to have the same thing with Waikanae. There does seem to be quite a lot of usage of that by the public. But I just think the Wainui one is not that public, you know, so to call that one of our public conveniences, it either needs to be a bit more obvious or, yeah, I'm not sure.
Right, it's time to bet. That's what they're talking about.
Just through the chair, I mean, I do have a bit of a problem with decommissioning toilets out there, knowing that the area is increasing in population and also popularity. This summer in particular, we've had a summer of a lot of nor'easterlies, so it hasn't been that nice to be frequenting the beach at Wainui and Makauroi, onshore winds predominantly, but on summers where we do have a lot of nor'easterlies and really hot conditions, those places are going to be more public, and those facilities are going to be well used. Once toilets are gone, they're going to be really hard to replace. So, you know, I do have a little bit of a problem when it comes to decommissioning toilets in a high profile area. So I'm certainly open to comment and debate, but you know, I'm not really keen on seeing any decommissioning on that area at all at this stage.
No, you should stay on all the time. Yeah, I'll use Malcolm's.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Malcolm. Oh, thank you, Councillor McLean. I did want to ask a question about the rationale regarding the closing of these 8. I mean, there's some detail in the report, but there needs to be like what's the full rationale in regards to that, and like does that rationale have history and it's not just based off one summer of kind of poor attendance? Does that have history? So I'd like to hear what's the rationale in regards to the closing of those toilets.
I mean, the budgeting was brought up as the rationale, the cost of maintaining so many toilets. As far as Councillor Foster goes, I guess we've got to really decide on what's a suitable distance between toilets. I mean, when you look at Wainui Surf Club and Okatu, it's a very short distance. Distance between Okatu and Chalet, not too bad, but quite short. Something like Northern Makauroi and Southern Makauroi, absolutely, you'd have to keep both because of that distance. So I guess when we are looking at the rationale, we have to make some sort of decision of how far is a reliable sort of expectation of people to get to a toilet, you know. So, I mean, when you look stock route to Wainui Surf Club, that's a reasonable distance, so you'd have to have those two. But probably the distance considerations are Wainui Surf Club, Okatu, Chalet, Wales. Is there too many in that sector? Outside those other ones, the Makarui ones and the stock route ones, I'm quite sure that the distances there require the toilets to be maintained, but that's personal view. Yeah. Councillor Dowsing?
Thank you. I would like to see a little bit more around the cost for maintenance. I mean, in this report, it's showing that decommissioning is going to cost 180,000, with the public conveniences having 30,000 per annum over the course of 6 years. So it doesn't appear to be a whole lot of savings to decommission these toilets. I'm not sure what the 50-year savings would be, for example, but the expense is high. And I think, as you say, it's around rationalising assets. For example, we have a few in that Okatu side, very few in the Wainui side, and the supporting infrastructure around it is also possibly a little lacking. For example, summer now, that stock route area is heavily frequented, especially during Rhythm and Vines. There's no footpath in Pare Street. There's no rubbish bins at the Cooper Street access. There's no, you know, so a rationalisation and stock take of what infrastructures in that area should be done. And it may be that we actually need to include a few things, and whilst also rationalising the amount of public conveniences. But.
Yeah. Councillor Dunn?
Yeah, it says on that report 4 of the 8 toilets. Can you tell us what 4 toilets you're talking about decommissioning? I do recall last year or year before we had the full public conveniences toilet, and we recognised there was way too many toilets at Wainui compared to something like Kaiti that had 1. So there definitely is need to remove some of those toilets. But I would like to know, what are the 4 that you're talking about decommissioning? Have they not been identified yet?
No, yes. So just by way of, these are the 4 that we're talking about here are actually the quick wins that we could say that we would describe as kind of no-brainers, because there is a really clear duplication. And I'll just draw you back to the community facilities strategy and what it was trying to achieve, which was, and these fit under that strategy, and that is a focus on where there is a need, a demonstrated need. I recognise there's a little bit of policy that needs to be wrapped around this, which I think what I'm hearing from the conversation is what's the rationale, where's the policy around this? So that's cool, we can work on that. But if there are 4 that we think that actually right now, and I'll just walk you through them quickly. Bright Street is the first one, with the opening of the library, which will be a fully serviced facility. It is a really very obvious duplication there of a facility. And so that was the first one. There were 2 to be looked at in, we had indicated 2 to be looked at between Makarori and Wainui, pretty similar to how Councillor Cranston has identified those ones, not at the Makarori end, more down the Wainui end around the Leisner Reserve part. And the last one was actually to reconsider the Tolaga Bay toileting situation. There's 4 toilets in that township at the moment. So yeah, that's a, yeah.
Okay, that would seem to indicate that it's written wrong, because it's got decommission the following Bright Street toilet between the library, when the library opens, but then it's got 4 of the 8 toilets between Makarui and Wainui.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think that's worded wrong. I think that's what's throwing everyone out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So apologies, it is, I just confirm that it should be 4 at this stage. We do envisage, once we get the policy framework established, there may be other toilets that we can look at decommissioning or changing the location of. So this is not necessarily seeing a reduction in how we're servicing our community. It's just that some of these toilets may not be in the best location at this stage. And so we may say, actually, we need toilets in other areas that we don't have any at the moment. And in particular, there is some discussion around how we provide toilet facilities for our cycle and walkways that are growing. And so, yeah, and it's all about community need, and yeah, that's where we're sitting.
Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not on toilets, but can you let me know when we're ready to talk about art? Because
Yep,
I just
sure.
have a few questions around that. Thanks.
Councillor Dunn and then Councillor Foster.
Yes, if we're going to decommission some of these toilets and there is a possibility they can be rescoped, for example, if we were to shut Chalet, could we turn it into a changing shed? Is there a possibility to do that? I mean, I noticed that we're talking about facilities like changing rooms and showers. Would take the toilet out, obviously. I'm just wondering if there's a possibility to turn some of these decommissioned toilets into changing sheds, for example, Chalet, or because we're talking about doing it in town, but we're not doing it anywhere else, and there's a good opportunity here to provide it. Even at the surf club, their toilet could become a changing room for anyone in that area.
Yeah, and on further to that, has there been any work done on whether they're relocable easily? So staying there as change rooms and possibility for relocation.
We can look further at that in the, from our...
Just on the matter of maintaining them for changing sheds, I think we've kind of learned in the past that leaving a facility such as that could be problematic, you know, just how it could be used in the future, you know, just being so enclosed in that, you know, we could have a lot of social problems. Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just from the area at Rock 2 in particular, as you said before, there's not much confusion with the Wainui Surf Club, whether it is accessible to the public because there's no signage whatsoever. But to me, if there's going to be any decommissioning, the high priority would be not just the Wainui Surf Club, but the one that next door to it at Rock 2 there. I mean, that's really close. If the Wainui Surf Club was made obvious that it was a more public convenience, you know, with signage and everything and accessibility, then the decommissioning of the one close by opposite the Oakden store would be quite credible. That would be the only one I suggest, because the one at the Chalet is a high surfing area, very well frequented, a big car park area. The one at Wales is also a high surfing area. So, you know, you might drive past some days when it's onshore and there's no one there, but you drive past on a day when there's good surf and those car parks are chocker. So there is definitely a need in those areas, and the area is growing. You know, and more people coming through every year, more frequently, and so you know, I'd be really concerned if we were going to be decommissioning those other toilets. I can understand one or two, which is the one we said, but others I would be really questioning.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Seaman.
I came today to speak against, even though I don't have a vote, the closing of maybe any of these toilets. Potentially there could be one or two looked at. I just have a different view to Councillor Foster with respect to the Okatu. That is the one. Log truck drivers park that. It's very accessible, and a number of log trucks from grain at a time, as we all do. That's the one place you see log truck drivers using that toilet. They stop there, they buy something at the Okatu store and frequently use the toilet. And it's actually got a reasonable amount of easy access parking off the road. So not only, so cars park there a lot. I haven't done a study at night time, but if we want to make some savings, one of the most close neighbours always asked why we bothered to put lights in the Turihau Bay toilet. So why don't we turn the lights out in the toilet at night time? Because I suggest that's not when they get madly used. And I'm not sure that they're in all the other toilets anyway. But I just can't believe that we're thinking of closing a number of toilets. When you listen to all of the news around other locations around New Zealand where there've been a lot of holiday makers and a lot of not just Freedom Campus, but holidaymakers, and everybody's asking for more toilets. We applied to a government fund for money for 3 toilets up the coast. We haven't managed to build them, and I note in some papers here that instead of them being built in the first quarter of this year, they're going to be built in the third. The one promised for an RFA never made it, and yet we're talking about taking away something that we've actually got at the moment, and I don't think any of them are not being used. I mean, summer has been really busy. There are lots of people at both ends of Makarori. Families go to to swim at the north end of Makarori. People go there to longboard, don't they, Councillor Foster? And we take our family there to picnic. So I actually see what happens there. The car park at the south end of Makarori is just busy all of the time. If we have consultation with with Tolaga Bay, there may be able to be some discussion between the concrete block toilet in near to the cemetery in Blue Waters and the other more modern, which was actually only replaced after someone ran into it with a car, not that far away along that beachfront road. But that, interesting enough, we're saying in this report that they don't meet the needs of the public and now, and they don't meet the needs of children and disabled. About 5 years ago, we spent quite a lot of money upgrading that concrete block toilet at Blue Waters, reconfigured the interior and put in a disabled toilet. Most of the time, that disabled toilet is locked. It's accessible from the outside for either men and women. But any time that I go to have a look, it's always locked. So, you know, we just need to look at what we do. And so I see that as potentially one place, but the toilets on the Coast Road are frequently used by our visitors and by our own locals who travel into Gisborne and need to use those toilets. So I think we need to look really carefully. And with the greatest respect to my colleague next door, I was going to comment on the fact that last year, there was a request for changing rooms. Let's make sure we keep our toilets before we fuss about getting changing rooms. There are bushes and cars you can get changed in, but it's not very good when people go to the toilet. I've seen correspondence recently from the landowners at this south end of Makarori asking us to do more about keeping those dunes area clean, and yet we sit here thinking we might take away 4 when the report actually looked like it meant 8. 4 toilets. So I urge those with a vote at this committee to not support that. And as somebody's already drawn to our attention, the savings is only $30,000 a year for 4 years. I wanted to know what happens to the savings after the 4 years. Is it our spend? Well, that's not a lot then, is it? Thank you. I just plea to keep the toilets.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. It looks to me like bullet point 3 should be in place before bullet point 2. Monitor remaining toilets to determine use levels to inform decisions on replacement, priority or decommissioning. I absolutely agree with the Okatu toilet being one of the better used ones. I mean, I live opposite that. And yeah, because it's so accessible to the road traffic and that, there's people there all the time. Probably the 2 that I would consider that we would be considering would be Chalet and Wainusa Surf Club.
And monitoring is a long bow, though, isn't it? Because the point's already been made that you know, what happens for 1 month is not quite the same that happens for the next month. So I'm not sure. I mean, apart from us having anecdotal monitoring from what we see, surely to goodness we're not going to pay someone to sit out there and monitor toilets.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, look, with the exception of the surf club one, they're all being used from my observation, and I'm regularly on the road, especially the one at Okatu. You know, not only but the people that go across the road to the shop, pop across. So that's where I am on this. And anyhow, what the NDN give us, these things would have been put in place as a result of wider community request.
No, that's cool. May I respond? what I'm hearing is that you'd like to see a little bit more evidence before you make commitment to the decommissioning of the toilets. I just wanted to outline that the rationale for coming to you today and pushing this decision forward faster was around the LTP and the need to get some, to ensure that we've got some funds in the LTP to be able to act on these things. So we can go away and further develop the policy stuff and bring it back. It will need to then go, if you make any decisions around these things, it will need to go to a later annual plan round or the next LTP to act on. In the meantime, however, there are a couple of actions that we are seeking some movement on, in particular around this Taruhiru Cemetery and the development of master plan and the starting of an eco-burial site that are longer term things. They're not high cost, but they are longer term things that need to sort of start now. We've probably got about 5 years of ash interment left at Taruhiru and around 15, I can't remember the exact year, 15 to 25 years at Taruhiru. We need to start planning now for the future for that. So what we are wanting to look at is a master plan for the Taruhiru and design guidelines for the rural cemeteries that can bring in some of the facilities that our community has asked for, such as hand washing at rural cemeteries. These things we're saying start now because then they're more affordable before we get to the absolute urgency of needing to do them. Oh my gosh, we need to do them now. We need to think about them now. So that's where those would be the things that I would focus on essentially right now would be around the cemeteries.
So that hand washing, it's not an insignificant budget. We've got 30,000 a year. How many cemeteries is that?
So there are 13 cemeteries in total, and so Taruhiru has facilities. They could do with an upgrade. However, what you're requiring is potable water supply. That's why it's a bit higher. We're probably looking at a bespoke solution to be able to find us and our cemeteries manager, Martin, has been looking at options already, but it will probably be a local bespoke solution for how to harvest that rainwater and make it available.
Yes, through the chair, can I just have a description so I'm clear in my mind what an eco-burial is, please?
We're not experts in that. However, our understanding at this stage is that it's a process where there is no chemical used in the body. There is no chemical used in the casket, coffin. You would be buried in a shroud of biodegradable material. The interesting thing with eco-burials are that they are essentially recycling space. That sounds strange. However, the idea is that someone is buried at quite a low depth, quite a shallow depth, allowing decomposition to happen quite rapidly. And within 25 years, that space is ready for another person to inhabit.
No, Councillor Fenn does not want to go into art just now that we've brought up cemeteries. Just in regards to cemeteries, I did a little bit of research on eco or natural burials as opposed to like embalming and gases and emissions and stuff like that. So I totally support having it open to eco-natural burials. The thing that, well, a couple of questions actually. In terms of if we're looking for other space in the future, have we got any idea where we're looking at? Because
we haven't
even
process.
Thought about that. Okay.
The way that the Parutahi Cemetery was intended as the overflow for Taruhiru initially. Right. However, we need to revisit whether that can happen. There are some issues at Parutahi Cemetery around the the ground is incredibly hard, and the cost of actually operationally of digging that site, they had to use a jackhammer a couple of times in the recent past at Parutahi. So whether that's actually a
suitable site,
is potentially questionable. Yeah, especially if it's an overflow for the rate of burials that happen at Taruhiru. So we will need to do our due diligence on this, basically.
Right, supplementary to that, in terms of cremations and gas emissions and climate change, do we have required filtering systems with the gases that go out of crematoriums and stuff? What do we have at the moment? Do we have a requirement to have filtering systems? Do we have a filtering system? How good is it? And in the future, are we looking at getting better at that?
So my understanding is that is a consented activity.
Yep.
So it is
right. I'll give you a quick fact. I just read this yesterday that in terms of in cremations, 28 gallons of fuel it takes to burn one body, which creates 540 pounds of emissions, carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere. That's crazy, eh? So I guess looking at natural burials and eco burials, that's probably a much better option. Yeah.
Thank you. I agree with the concept of preparing a master plan for the Taruhiru cemetery, and the cost seems quite the cost seems in line with what I'd expect for a business case. It's around $15,000 invested into planning for the future. However, I would like to see it as more of a business case format than a future plan, because in this we've discussed that it's overly rate subsidised, and we need to start getting more reflective on our cost recovery. We're looking at the need to increase levels of service, so that's also going to have a rate demand. So I would like to, when I read this report, I want to be able to see what the quantity of eco burials may be, what the other alternative demands on the future of this industry may be, before I made a decision to invest a lot more into it. It is essentially a commercial enterprise, although there's a great deal of sensitivities, and privatization isn't really happening in this. So it's a service we need to provide, but at the same time, there's an obvious fee structure. There's an obvious need and desire from the community. There's a visible direction it's taking with eco burials. So a more formal business case would firm up my mind as to the best direction to go, versus making a plan that suits all needs, but doesn't necessarily have foundation in how we would fund it.
Too quickly in that direction. And then just one other question on page 34 still, and it relates to lack of facilities for freedom camping is in one box. And then it says private sponsored freedom camping hub. And if you look at item 16, the table below shows recommendations with options recommended, option in bold. How much work has been done on the idea of a private sponsored freedom camping hub? And where are we thinking that's going to be?
Through the chair. We have been since the Freedom Camping bylaw was initiated in 2012, We have had ongoing discussions with the Motor Caravan Association, the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association. They are very keen to set something up. So this is essentially recognising their desire to have such a facility, and our commitment to work with them on that. We have had many iterations of things, but there's nothing firm at this stage. So that's...
But supplementary to that, we should be aware that that would probably only meet the needs of the Motorhomes Association and wouldn't meet the needs of younger freedom campers. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, just on that freedom camping, I was going to bring that up as well, because it's just kind of popped up in the conveniences in the toilets area. But at the moment, there's an online petition about the Makarori car park for freedom camping with over 400 supporters complaining about the freedom camping taking up the surfers area at Makarori's, the bottom of the Makarori Hill there. Now, I know, and I've spoken with David Wilson, there's going to be an upgrade of that car park in March, but I think we should put it out there and let everyone know that that upgrade is going to encourage, maybe with signage, freedom campers to be by the toilet side of that car park area only, allowing the free space for surfers to rock up most mornings and be able to have parking available for them to go surfing, because it is becoming a major problem. Obviously, there wouldn't be 400 odd people and more signing up to this petition at the moment, you know. So that is one area that we really need to look at and to try and monitor. And by putting with this upgrade, I believe it's going to be all tar sealed and maybe lined as well, so people will know that they can't park diagonally across that car park. But it would certainly be good to encourage and have signage to encourage people freedom camping to park only by that toilet area in that vicinity, away from the car parking on the beach for the surfers.
Yeah, I wasn't sure when the conversation about freedom camping would come up, but I was aware of that petition. So as soon as I was aware of the petition, I decided to monitor it myself. I've been going over there at least twice a day, usually first thing in the morning and last thing at night, doing counts of freedom camping, counts of the condition, been going into the toilet, seeing what the toilet's like. I've been walking the area, seeing what the condition's like, and I've got an Excel spreadsheet which I'm doing, which will be available to staff for that, and I will keep that going. Really interesting information. From my perspective, at this stage, the problem's not as much of a problem as it's anticipated, because what I'm finding is when you do go down there, and it is super crowded, there's a lot of people in vans coming there with their families, and those vans look like they're part of the freedom camping, but they're not actually, because when I go there at darkness, the numbers are far less of people actually overnighting there. And I'm also doing a count of the spaces available every time I drive down there, and that's on the spreadsheet. I haven't been there yet, and there hasn't been one space. So I agree that it's busy, and I agree that I wasn't doing the monitoring right through the heart of summer. But as far as litter, condition of the toilets, behaviour of the freedom campers, that I actually haven't seen a problem at this stage. But I do anticipate a problem if it's really growing, you know, and it possibly is. So, yeah, I'll continue that monitoring. I'm going to wait tonight, but as soon as I come back, I'll maintain that monitoring. And it is quite interesting to see what's going on. But as far as the petition goes and what they're saying,
Yeah, just a comment to that. I mean, what we're finding is that, and then what I'm saying the local surfers and that, is that when they rock up for a surf first thing in the morning at 5:30, it's first light, they can't get a park. So what's happening is a lot of freedom campers are coming late at night, and they don't know any better. You know, it's not their problem. We just need to be making sure that we have better signage to make the area a lot more user friendly. But you know, they'll come late at night, and they don't know any better. By first thing in the morning, you know, there is a lot of people there, and a lot of locals have been saying they can't get a park at 6:30 in the morning because of the freedom campers that are there, or really early. So, you know, when the monitoring happens, it needs to be happening, you know, first light basically, because that's when generally there's the best surf.
Yeah, like I say, I drive up there twice a day at least, and always getting parks.
Can we talk about art now?
Yeah, just staying on the public conveniences, I just wanted to highlight that in terms of the establishing change facilities, it's a very limited scope and we're just focusing on town, and I just wanted to highlight that. You know, these Wainui and Makarori are really high used areas, and just wondering if we could be more equitable in terms of our change facilities. Thank you.
Yep, cool, thank you. I'd just like to say, I was actually really excited when I was reading this about the proposed changes that we have for art in public places, and it got my brain thinking more. I totally agree with the proposed changes that you have here and the creating of a regional governance body, because to me, art in our place is a bit ad hoc. Art, I guess we tend to underestimate the power that art has and the impact that it can make, and particularly in terms of social change. I think we're at an opportune time right now in terms of our bicultural identity and everything that we can do to actually put a really good plan around that. But also, more so, we're also at a really big tipping point in terms of globally with climate change and global warming. So when I look at, I think it was in the legal part that you had, and it talked about the needs for now and the anticipated needs in the future. And global warming and climate change is part of our future. I would really like to see, I guess, work with a collaboration with artists and see something around climate change, global warming, and depict that in our art here. I think then we could be real leaders in our community, create a just community and actually a sustainable future. So support the changes, and I guess as far as the regional governance group in art, I'd put my hand up to be on that any day. So thank you.
Thank you. So far, my experience of arts and public places and being on the committee is that primarily it's a body to assist in funding of arts projects. It's not taking a leadership role as such, and I believe that's the differentiation, is that it's not looking at the investment in art and in our public places as a growing organism, as a complete structure, and seeing the overall direction our city will take. It's more project based, and it has been very, very successful in that approach, because that is where art struggle typically, is in funding. And so I think it does a fantastic job of making that available. As Councillor Fenn says, at the moment it's a little bit ad hoc around our city. Now there's nice things about that, obviously, in that you want art to be creative, and you want art to be unstructured sometimes, because that's where the most that's where some of the gold lies in art. Where where we put plans in place and create a strategic body is to ensure that we know what we want in our city. What the art itself is should be left up to the artists, but what we want as what we want to develop and how we want our place to look can be determined through this. And so I support the creation or possibly the expansion of the Arts and Public Places Committee to have a more leading governance role in that area. But yes, I don't think we should stifle art and its artists and certainly still allow for approaches from external groups to come to that committee or to others to look for funding and seek help.
Yours, bro. Okay. Thanks, Fleming. Just off the, actually, I'll leave this here. Just off the back of what you're saying around arts and public places, do you think them as an organisation will be open to expanding? Just before I get into my actual.
Absolutely. I think the trust is probably not working at capacity because of the time frame it takes to go through the procedures, and I think so. I think that they could potentially have either be looking at more governance style work alongside their current funding. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Councillor Dowsing. I agree with this part of the paper in regards to, I guess, the lack of strategic direction around what we're doing in regard to arts in our public places. If you go anywhere else in the country and they have like the strategic direction of all of the art that goes up, the artists take control of what artistically is available, but they're given direction by a specific governance body to help make that cohesive and help make that look great. I mean, we have a lot of bare walls in Gizzy. I get asked every second week, what's up with the wall at the police station, or prior to business applications, what's happening there, or we just have a lot of bare walls and they get mentioned to me a lot. So we do need a strategic direction, and that does need to come from some kind of regional governance body. So I do completely agree with this part. In regards to the toilets part, I actually do agree with the decommissioning of some toilets, but I think that part needs to be left to lie on the table because it's about the specificity around which specific toilet, and also like some fleshing out specific. That also actually happens to some of you guys, but you guys keep talking while your guys' microphones are off. So like specifically in regards to use and numbers of people that are that utilise, I absolutely agree in regards to distance and also duplication. We do need to do something wiser and smarter. I don't know if I'm a big fan of widening our scope around change facilities to start including everywhere else other than kind of the city centre, because we need to start somewhere. We need to see if like that model actually works first before we start rolling them out everywhere else.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think this comes under the arts, and you can.
Yeah, that is where up there as well. What's happening with the
There's a demand for them. We're talking about the reinstatement of the endeavoured boats or ships.
Morning, everyone. Through the chair, we've not done any further work around reinstatement of them since we took them down. There was a paper that we took to committee that outlined options around rebuild of the assets, and I believe the recommendation was to include that as part of the applications. But since then, there's been nothing done.
So I think we really should put it back in a plan somewhere along the line, because people say, they talk about the navigations, and what about those two ships that were there been there for years?
Can I?
That's a very wise strategic move there, Councillor Cranston. I actually disagree in regards to the putting back up of the Endeavour ships, because I've heard 0 people actually, ask where they were, and like I hang out with a wide range of community people as well, and none of them, not a single person, has actually ever brought up with me about putting those Endeavour ships back up there. I would be very surprised if there is an overwhelming majority of people wanting those to go back up. Surely there will not be as many people as yeah, like I doubt that the numbers of people supporting the Endeavour ships going back up would be even close to the number of people that support Turanga Nui a Kiwa being our name and not Poverty Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember that report quite well that we were just discussing. I raised it at the time that there'd been several repairs on these ships over the years. The last was done essentially with marine grade ply. I think it was done by a school in the last instance. And we had a repair policy which had worked, and it was volunteers had continually repaired these ships, volunteering their time and only requiring the cost of materials. So it had been a very cheap repair each time. And sure, they haven't lasted that long in their repaired state, but they have lasted. I raised at the time I asked again at the time why we weren't taking that approach again, because we had a very large budgetary figure against the repair of it. So I absolutely support Councillor McLean in that we should at least look at what this minimal cost will be for buying some new timber for these ships and get them repaired. And we have a commemoration coming up where they would be absolutely useful. And they are a fantastic piece of art. And unfortunately, I don't support Councillor Wharehanger in this. The absence of a request for those to go back up is not the absence of the desire for them to go up. I personally would like to see them up, and I'm sure many others would.
Okay, just to move this along, I'll ask the non-participant staff on the issue, please.
Sorry, can I just add to that? Before our current CEO, I had asked on behalf of VIT if they could actually view those endeavours to actually look at doing them in class, probably free of cost, or a minimal cost to actually do those. And just in relation to Councillor Wharehanger, everyone that I have spoken to would like to see one endeavour, one waka. Thank you.
Chairman, you've just nailed what, listening to the Gisborne politics is very interesting, but to me seems that the Art and Public Places Trust, whoever they might be, I believe Shannon's one of them, need to be reactivated, a policy in place and accountable to this body. So that doesn't appear to be happening at present.
Yeah, I will, sorry. Just in regards to what Councillor Dowsing was saying, I'm not, by talking about before, I'm not looking at stifling art or artists, but I do think that we do need a plan in place, and particularly a plan in place for the enablement and the support of young people and art and our future issues.
Yeah, absolutely. This discussion that's happened here, like in regards to the Endeavour ship, is a prime example of why we need a governance group that's in charge of our arts pieces, right? Because we are not artists and we don't have that kind of strategic foresight. And the last thing we want is Endeavour up here and then a whale picture there and all of those kinds of things. All of those things could probably fit in together, but they need to actually be directed by people that actually know what they're doing, and we aren't the ones that know what we're doing in regards to that. So it's a prime example of why we need that strategic direction, right? Or maybe the ex-petrol place, petrol lane, I knew it.
Yes, that would be fantastic to get some clarity around your resolutions. We've recommended going out to consultation. What I've heard is you're not ready to go out to do some more monitoring of the conveniences. You are prepared for us to progress the master planning, the idea of master planning and moving the cemetery space forward, and you are prepared for us to go out and start to discuss the governance.
Yeah, move excluding the public conveniences, obviously.
Sorry, just for clarity, but just for clarity, we're like in regards to the public conveniences that's being laid on the table for further discussion, future or being declined right now. Just for clarity. So our decision is.
Oh, should I read what I've moved essentially? So I've moved that we note the contents of all the reports as written in number 1, and number 2 approves the release of the proposed changes for arts and public places and cemeteries for public consultation from 8th till the 28th of February 2020.
I don't think it's necessary to do monitoring. I think what we should have is a policy. And a policy will inform me that we need monitoring. How do you intend on monitoring toilets? So yeah, you could do it based on whether it's distance or population, or I'm struggling to understand how you're going to monitor toilets. Let's stick with a policy.
There are a number of options which we've looked at for this, actually for cycleways too, with installing. You can get temporary sensors that you can install that are a laser beam sensor that you can, they're actually mobile and you can move them around places. So there are options for that type of thing, that we're not having someone sitting counting people going into the toilets. Yeah. Mm. Mm.
We still need to include the part of the public conveniences in this decision, because that's just one part around the decommissioning of toilets. There are the study around the change facilities. There's the private sponsored Freedom Camping Hub. So by us not including that in the decision, we're also saying we're not going out for consultation in regards to those things. So I think we need to get clarity in regards to that. I'm happy with us getting more information around the public toilets part of it, but the other stuff, I think that we should still progress that stuff forward. That needs to be in the decision. Thank you.
Can I suggest that it could remain the same with a note that subject to the changes identified in the committee meeting? And the minutes would reflect what those changes were.
Yep. All right, we'll give it a fair wait, so we can move on. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Quite a lot of signs, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess when you take the whole reserve, there's a number of signs that have been replaced for a while.
Yeah. First, locales, it was out of the scope of locales, but locales is doing a lot of work in that area. Wouldn't there be efficiencies in locales taking that up? Why did we get to another contractor?
Exister is specifically finding
Turn this thing on. Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate Andy on this report. Not only being a resident on the coastal side of the hill, I'm a regular walker over the hill and seeing the progress that's happening there and the amount of people that are frequenting it. It's quite incredible. We see the numbers here with the average challenge, but outside of that, outside of the challenge, the numbers of people that are frequenting the hill is absolutely staggering. And it's a great facility for fitness, for just recreational enjoyment. It ticks a lot of boxes, as well as a historical heritage as well. and being one of the most archaeological historic sites in the country as well. So we're sitting on a real gem in this Maunga. So, I love seeing all the progress that's happening here, the new tracks that are going to be developed, and the investment from government that's going into it as well is absolutely really commendable. And also Port Eastland, Eastland Group, it's great to see them supporting and funding that other track, which is probably the most, at the moment, it's probably the most dangerous part of the whole hill, is trying to access the beach along the road. So by moving the pedestrians and cyclists off that and having a bush type walk as well would be absolutely commendable to the hill. So yeah, fantastic work that you've been doing.
Thank you. I didn't see it in the report, although perhaps I missed it. Is there provision for water on the hill, for drinking fountains, etc., which is something that's been highlighted many times? Drinking fountains on any of the walking tracks or roadside or roadway.
Not at this stage. The issue with water is supply. So it's about how we get water to use it for a toilet facility or drinking. There is an option which we are looking at now, which is using Chorus building, which has a facility to gather water from the roof, put it in storm water, manage that, and some sort of local toilet or around where we've got storage facilities up there and maintain it.
Were there not taps partway up by one of the car parks? And I thought it was partially reticulated.
Only one tap comes up from the right side.
Yep.
And it's on about a third of the way up. Everywhere else is done. There would be or could be some plans for some of these buildings.
That's a great point that Councillor Dowsing brings up in regards to water, and knowing that we have
while we have the Tairaki Navigations project, which has the summit under it, it actually is quite connected to this whole redevelopment of the room as well. Getting on top of the summit.
All right, so we've got recommendation, page 38, noting the content of the report.
You can't put the grade on top of that and we're, well,
I think there's always a risk, and this project has shown it around asbestos and other things like that, that there are things that we don't know about, and that's one of the issues with renovations. As we progress through the project further, that risk decreases. So we recognise that there is a risk there, but it's a smaller risk than we've had previously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about external lighting and security cameras. Can you update me on what we have between McDonald's and the library in terms of lighting and security cameras and the front of the library? Okay. I understand we have provision and I understand there's not cameras there.
There's plenty of lighting outside around the McDonald's side, the front, and the car park side of the library. There's lighting on the building and lighting on poles outside as well.
Specifically and down that alleyway, because we know...
Specifically down that alleyway, yes, there is as well.
Can you explain where those are?
They are dotted along the pathway that runs parallel to the building, and they are on the building itself.
Right, okay.
And as far as cameras go, there are a good number of cameras in the library on all key points as recommended by the professionals. There is provision outside of the building for future CCTV cams that might come through the camera trust associated with the police station, but that is totally outside the library project scope.
Okay, so provision for cameras externally, I understand there is provision with cables already in that alleyway, because this is what we're talking about here is a hotspot for crime.
Yep, it is a hotspot for crime. There is wiring to that very narrow point between the Treble Court building and the library itself. Yep, where the two buildings sort of join together.
Yep.
There is also wiring on the Bright Street corner point. Hard to describe without the plan. So if you can envisage where the youth centre part is, up on that top of that, there is wiring provision there.
You're talking about opposite the front of the building across the road by the Toilet City Watch. There's a lamp post there.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about anything off the library site.
Okay.
I'm talking about on the library building.
All right. My concern is that, one, we have Crime Alley, and that is between McDonald's, the library, all the way down through Hardy's Lane into Grey Street. And that's known by the police as crime hotspot.
It's a total crime hotspot, but again, it's totally outside the project brief of the building at this point, but we have made provision should the police and associated community groups decide to enhance that policing in the night, because yes, it is correct, it is at night time that the problem is.
Thanks, Penny, and I know we have talked about that, and it's great that we have provision for this, and it may be outside the planned scope of the library. What concerns me is somehow, and I think council needs to actually pay for these cameras. We have to have these cameras put in place. We have a camera down by the AMP building. We have a camera down by the fire station, and we have a McDonald's camera there, but nothing is actually on the front of this stunning building where Wallandog is going to be. There is nothing there, no camera there. We know that young people always congregate around McDonald's, around the front of the library there. What I'm asking is, if it's outside our scope of this plan, how do we pay for a camera? How do we get council to say, we want this camera? I've talked to the police, I've talked to McDonald's, I've talked to the public. A young boy was as we know, nearly killed last Tuesday morning at 2 o'clock in the morning. If we have cameras and sufficient lighting, which you're saying we have sufficient lighting, if we have cameras in place, we could deter some of this happening. And I would hate to see a stunning building like this open to graffiti, all sorts of stuff like that. I suppose. Yep. Yep, thank you.
$7 million project, I firmly believe the council should have made provision for a camera. And it's not fair to say if the camera trust might fund it. The camera trust has no money unless it's sourced from other philanthropic people in the community. So, and the camera trust only puts the cameras up when the police indicate it's a need, and that is well known. And I well remember raising the blind corner that Councillor Fenn has alluded to that occurred between the buildings at the back and the library ages and ages ago when we were planning. And so I do think, and we can't do anything about it now, and Councillor Cranston's rightly made the point, but I think we should be asking in a minute at the end of this meeting that the council look at its significant projects and does something about allowing, $10,000 is about the cost of a camera and installation, and the cabling has been put in, as Councillor Fenn has said. Excuse me, I've just come from a meeting and exactly the same applies to the navigation project, where a council officer has had a meeting and asked whether the Camera Trust will fundraise for a camera, let me find the right paragraph, on that project. And that's another multi-million-dollar project. And so council should lift its game and actually start allowing the $10,000 cost of a camera in their actual capital projects. That's not a lot. The Lions managed to do it for the children's bike park. So I support Councillor Fenn. The trust and police will be happy to have a conversation about location, but it ought to become policy that it goes into the project.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my concern was very much along the same lines as yours, and whilst we've been, whilst it was passed over as the risk in a project decreases as you draw near to the end, it's still indicated as a medium risk, not a low risk, and we're 1 month from completion by this paper. So I don't personally think that that's an acceptable argument to be 1 month out and still seeing a medium level of risk of blowing out. I'd also like to point out that this project is not $50,000 over budget. The budget is $6,881,400. We are nearly $500,000 over budget, and that is a budget which we increased due to an earlier blowout. We increased by 1.2 million or something like that. So really, off our initial project, we're around about 25% over budget if you take into account the very large contingency that you pointed out. This project has been a disaster in terms of project management and in terms of project management and budget and meeting the budgetary constraints. An absolute disaster. You cannot tell me a project that starts with a $5.6 million budget and goes out to 7.38 million and still has a medium risk of blowing out over the top of that is not a disaster. That is, and the reason that's a disaster is because all of that money is council money. We've gone and asked to manage to get $350,000 worth of NZT money, which should have decreased our scope, but didn't. It's just been hidden as an increase in available funds and not discussed as a blowout of budget. The reason we need to highlight this project and the reason we need to be more conscious of that cost is because this is where deficits happen. And when we say add cameras into the scope of a project, that is perfectly feasible. When you say add cameras at this stage, it is impossible. We cannot continue to borrow and try to force an issue on projects that are already wildly out of control. I absolutely agree with the project. I think it's a beautiful project. I think it's going to be a wonderful building. But when I look at those figures, I am very, very disappointed about the way the project has proceeded. The initial problem was that we discussed the cost of concrete and steel going up, and that our quantity surveying wasn't accurate enough. Then now we've run into asbestos, and we've run into, but that does not equate to the millions that we've gone over. Those simple definitions do not, in my mind, meet the overrun we've had. So yeah, I think this needs to be highlighted as a case study on what went wrong and how we avoid these problems in the future.
Okay, while I agree with this, well, I agree with your sentiment, Councillor Dowsing. I'm a little bit concerned that you've put it directly at project management as being a disaster. So I certainly don't support that sentence. But the sentiment on the budget line is quite different.
I'll make an apology for that. I do mean the project management in the greater sense, as in the project has run out of control, not project management as in terms of a project manager or that facility of staff.
Through the chair, I take on board what the councillor is saying around this project. The scope has moved and changed as the project has gone on. Things that we haven't expected have come up, which we have communicated to council on a regular basis through this project. 3 years ago, we were talking about a $3.3 or a $5.5 million project. Council made a decision about going with a $5.5 million project. There have been regular updates around scope changes, unexpected items, and there have also been papers on funding applications, etc. as well. This is not all council money. This is a lot of this money, or most of this money, is actually from external benefactors, and they have seen fit to actually fund the unexpected and scope increases with the project. So yes, I think with all projects there are learnings in project management, and we do a review on all projects afterwards. But actually I think this has been a successful project, and in terms of the decisions that council's made about funding applications, we are $50,000 over the project cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the committee is not going to speak to it before me, I will speak to it. I too share those concerns, because a substantial part of that build was new build. It wasn't like it was just alteration. I mean, a very big substantial part of it was absolutely new build. So that should have been able to be managed, and I don't mean by ourselves, I mean managed in the broader concept by those who undertook the contract. I just think there's some real lessons for us in this. We're about to embark potentially on the Lawson Field Theatre, and just a couple of weeks ago we made comments around the scope of the swimming pool, and frankly I would think we need to be reconsidering the scope of the swimming pool. We've gone for the A grade, best bells and whistles, and if this is the kind of thing that happens on a project that starts out at 5.5, what is going to happen on something that's potentially at the minute 27 million? We're just being so ambitious, and we just don't seem to manage to have really good control over the idiosyncrasies of a project that happen along the way, and that's the reality of what happens. And it was a point well made by Mr. White that we started out with about a 3.3 build, and there was a group and there were people that wanted internally and externally who wanted future proofing was the word, and to go for the 5 point something project, but that was subject to it being completely externally funded. So which much of it has, not all of it, much of it. I just do say again, we just have to learn from this and make sure that whatever we can possibly learn from is not repeated in other projects that this council undertakes, because you'll run out of goodwill from all of these funders. We're just really lucky that we have got good local support and good support from the philanthropic sector, both locally, and I mean that in the broadest sense when we go to lottery grants and NZCT. So this community benefits from their support, but we just need to do our responsibility and make sure we're as careful as we can be to ensure that our figures are correct right at the beginning.
I'm really proud of this project. I'm really stoked with the way the building is looking. I acknowledge that it has gone over, but when you look at where these excesses have been, they're absolutely essential. They're professional services, and they're ensuring that our temporary library stays open because the build has gone longer. This isn't being frivolous. This is really good project management and spending money where it needs to be spent. When you add it all up, it is only a $50,000 overspend. And I also just wanted to reiterate that that $3.1 million was gifted to this community from previous people for the library, and then the rest was fundraised. So all in all, I think it's been managed really well, and I can't wait for the opening.
Thank you. When the library opens, the Bright Central will close.
There are public toilets in the library, and they will be open when the library's open, but they're in the middle of the library. So there's no chance they can be open when the library's not open.
Okay, that's something I'll probably look at a bit further later on.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, please. Moved by Councillor Dunn, second by Councillor McClung. Noting the report. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Page 50. Community Development Service Activity Report.
We're on page 50. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on a more positive note, just reading and taking into account the executive summary, I'd just like to say the amount of people and amount of public that have actually came and said to me how fantastic the junior cycleway is. They love it. So thank you, Lions.
Through the chair.
Thank you. I just had a question from page 52 on operating expenditure. It says the unfavourable variance within the Olympic pools activity is offset by underspends within the library and theatre activity. I believe that's really just the theatre activity, because when you go to page 54, the year to date on libraries is on expenditure is 2.1 million versus a budget of 1.6, indicating that the library area is actually over budget as well as the pools. So the theatres are obviously doing a fantastic job, I assume. Is that correct?
No, through the chair, I think you need to look at the headings above each of those columns. You're looking at the capital expenditure column when the report is actually about the operating expenditure.
Okay.
It's the top right hand. So we're showing a favourable variance in libraries of $16,000.
Perfect, thank you. That's a good explanation.
Thank you. I was, Councillor Seaman.
Yeah, I'm still on toilets.
Yep.
On my bed bandwagon, since it comes to it. I hope it, no, not literally. But the last paragraph on page 51 tells us that the public toilets are going to be completed in the third quarter of this financial year. But in the earlier report, it's actually said they were going to be completed in the first quarter. And I just can't believe that resource consent issues, which is what's mentioned in the in-depth part of the paper, is what's delaying the toilets on the coast. And if you recall, there was a tender called last year for design and build for the 3 toilets that were to be relocated. And the funds are not Gisborne District Council funds. They were funded by tourism and the capacity for, you know, small areas to meet the needs of tourism. So how can a resource consent cause 6 months delay? Because that's what effectively the report was telling us.
Through the chair, yes, that's quite right. We have had a location challenge with regards to the site at Inara. It's to do with the fine-tuning of the location for the purpose of the facility and adjacent tank from the adjoining landowner. We've now got resolution on that. So that's been submitted to the consent to finalise that.
That's one, but what about the other 3? Because there were 3 more. That was always going to be built independently, wasn't it? It was going to be last year, but that's you understand that. Now, what about the other 3, which are going to be beginning of this year?
Through the chair, quite right. Yes, the other 2 are upgrades of existing facilities, so it's like-for-like replacements and no consent required. And the other one is an internal upgrade of the Eastcape Lighthouse, which is in good structural condition. So the idea is to do an RFS with the view to get those other ones done quite quickly. Our contractor who is engaged to do the work can take the facilities off site and had done so. So it's a matter of just going on site, putting all the fixtures in place as well as connecting to the tanks. It's quite a short on-site job.
Thank you very much. But again, through the chair, why then am I reading that it says the installation timeframes in the third quarter, I beg your pardon, the third quarter of this financial year, I read that as the third quarter of the year. So we can expect them to be there by June, by year end. Great. Thank you very much. I did have one other question, Your Worship.
Jeez. Get that man a chain.
Just with respect to and this is now where the rest of the detail on toilets is, and that's on page 73.
Through the chair, my observation of this is that there are many people involved in this decision, and a number of them have different views on what's acceptable and what's not. And we are working through that process to get everybody on the same page who has to sign this off.
Mr. Chairman, surely at the end of the day, it's the fire service that have to sign it off. I mean, because now the theatre groups have to have someone from the fire service in the building while the production's going on. And you know, we just don't seem to be making any headway.
I think we are making headway, and I stick with my previous comment. Yes, the fire service does have to sign it off, but they need the support of other parties along the way to be confident to do that. So we do have a contingency in place, which is not the ideal contingency, but we will get this resolved.
Thank you. I did have my hand up first. Just on the bottom of page 60, subject to confirmation of location, the historic fire bell and belfry installation is ready for installation. Mr. Keith Watts, he came and saw us over a year and a half ago about this, and we had a location organised, but I can understand we're looking at a possible better location, but can I get a bit of a progress update on this, please? What, sorry? Is there an alternative location being identified at all? Or, I mean, at the end of the day, when we had someone come and present to us that we all agree on, we actually did pass it, that we were okay with the location, and then it gets changed. And then a year and a half down the track, we've had no progress, and people get a little bit upset.
From that, we did quite extensive work around coexisting at the library, at the Kill Street Junction, where the council was originally
yeah.
back in the late 1800s, as well as other riverbank sites. So there was quite a lot of work around alternative locations.
Right, okay, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 64, the Makaraka Cemetery Headstone Project, because I'm just a bit afraid that I've missed a group email somewhere along the way. It's good to see that there is progress here, because and I do understand the process, it does take a long time, but are there any further updates or time frame around next steps? Because
yeah, if I can echo that, because there was delays at the end of last year.
Yeah.
I'll speak to this. So I'm looking at the last update that was sent to the working group, which includes the two councillors on the working group. Resource consent has been lodged. Heritage New Zealand, we were told originally that Archaeological Authority was required. We engaged an archaeologist and then we were told it was not required. So that explains that point. 2 iwi groups have now been spoken to, engaged in respect to the project, and both are keen to be involved. So that's Mahaki and Ronga Whakata. And there will be draft legal agreement in place in the week of the 12th of February. And that was an update that was sent on the 30th of January.
Yes, but we do take
I can't answer that with absolute certainty, but I think it would be fair to say that libraries do actually record historical information, and I think it makes sense that the library would be involved in such a historical piece of set of information.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Councillor Bidette?
Yes, it's working. Page 80 at the bottom, and this, I know Kate has just left, unfortunately, because she spoke to me on this the other day about implement the joint management agreement between the council and Knights Pro for the Waiapu River. I can't understand why this is here and not at assets and infrastructure. However, the point I want to make is that, and I've spoken prior to this, the CEO is well up to speed on it. There are dollars sitting in Headley's Yard in Ruatoria that are already paid for and debited to the Ruatoria Restoration Project. There are more dollars sitting at the bottom of the Kainanga Hill. In terms of the long-term plan, the Waiapu River project, this here has no dollars attached to it. $5,000, I think, from memory. One of the issues here is that Council of the Regulator, we have to do something. Last year, where the winter and we had two bad freshers, where the two rivers met, that's the Mata and the Tapuaro, there were about 7 hectares taken away down the river. So there's a degree of urgency attached to this. I've been talking to Kerry Hudson, the council rep, in terms of this particular department. They've got a very intensive planting program being put up, but the dollars are something that need to be attended to, and I intend to follow this through at our community meetings because something needs to be done. And the people with the skin in the game with this are the farmers, both sides, or the landowners, both sides of the river. While iwis talk for us as a tribe, they got no skin in the game on this project. So, I mean, I just want to see some action, and at present, there's bugger all happening.
Good. Yeah.
So with regards to this particular action and the on the activity update, it's to do with the actual joint management agreement.
Yep.
So, which is why it's different to what I've needed, to the infrastructure issue around Lancaster and Waiapu. For this particular action to be bring this together with the guide. For the Waipu budget, we do have about $80,000 per annum and $10,000 of staff time and riders around the East Coast Erosion Control Forestry scheme. And then we have further work to do around the asset side of things. So that is on our agenda to pick up, but better in the infrastructure.
But so supplementary, Mr. Chairman, it's still there. We will have this project in the long-term plan.
Yeah, we have got that in the long-term plan.
Thank you.
I was intrigued to read it. The stock control bylaw was approved by Council in 2017. Now, the NZTA have identified jurisdictional issues with the bylaw and further work is required, and we've adopted. Oh, sorry, Heather. We've adopted that bylaw, and I want to know what, it's not been reported to EP&R yet, and I don't think it's in our agenda today. So what are the jurisdictional issues that NZTA have identified about the stock control bylaw that went through an internal council process with hearings?
So, as I understand from staff, because the bylaw went into the state highway jurisdiction, that triggered a requirement from NZTA to have engagement around the bylaw. So it was.
And they did. They responded.
No, well, that's where I understood that comment related to
Okay, thank you.
Supplementary to that, Mr. Chairman, and it has nothing to do with this paper, but just listening to the CEO and EP&R might well answer the question. In terms of the resources that have been provided by the Transport Agency to attend to these issues that are in here, will we be privy to, or can I ask at EP&R, the details of how 130,000 extra funding is being allocated? Or is that not the right? Thank you. Okay.
We were to have a visit to Anzac Park, but it's been cancelled because of rain coming and going.
There's not specific timeframes for this project, but obviously they want to have this in operation into 2019 at the latest. So for them to source their funds, the earlier the better to get started and to be having meaningful conversations with funding agencies, the better really. Through discussions with Kelly, the funding agencies have requested some form of formal support from council in this way, so that they have confidence that it aligns with our other activities and with the greater scope of what we're trying to achieve for those for that time period. And I believe this this fits perfectly with the concepts we're moving towards. Absolutely. So there is, they use local and international artists. All artists volunteer their time. So it is it's quite amazing in that, because the quality of the artists is phenomenal, and the international artists they get are widely recognised. So to see them come to a region and to do artwork because of the concepts behind Seawalls is quite impressive. But they do support local. Kelly herself has been one of the artists in the Seawalls program, and she's from Gisborne and would again advocate for other artists locally.